We can go ahead and turn the lights on. Definitely lower the podium. It's the way it is. Got to live in reality. Well, let me just tell you why I'm here. Wasn't the plan, but the reason I'm here is because Jeff Gale, good friend of mine, double booked. It happens to the best of us. So he was supposed to be here this morning sharing about the yak. Instead, he kicked the ball down the road to Mr. Braden. Appreciate that. If you have any more questions, talk to him. On a short notice, I decided I had something that I'd like to share with you all. And if you would turn in your Bibles to the book of Ecclesiastes, so we'll spend the remainder of our time in there. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit less preachy, a little bit more conversation here, and hopefully we're going to have a conversation together. That doesn't mean you get to talk. It just means that I'm going to lead us in a conversation. Your silent head, my verbal processing, okay? Just like class. All right. And but it's about a subject. It's about a subject that all of us have probably asked questions about. I remember Bible college, got married, going into my senior year, made a total of $12,000 that year for the whole year. Both my wife and I combined. It was a big year. And I had no idea how it is that we survived. Because paying for college, graduating, moving to seminary, everything, our faith was thick. We were standing on fairly thin ice. Didn't realize it, but our faith was sick. Thick. There it is. This isn't on video, is it? Yes, it is. And we ended up, I graduated, ended up with a chance to pay off all of my graduation debt because we had some stocks. I married into money. I married into some stocks. But I wanted to be a good leader in the home, and I didn't really know what to do with stocks. I had never done anything with stocks before. In fact, stocks scared the bejeebies out of me. To me, it seemed like it was gambling. But to my wife and to her family, big into finances and those kinds of things, it just seemed like regular language. It seemed like wisdom. And so I determined that I had to figure this whole thing out. And should we take the money out and pay for school? And that seemed to be a good thing to me. Or should we be putting money into it and invest it? And what should we do? A lot of couples run into that early financial conversation. And so I began to ask people questions. And what I discovered is that everybody had a different agenda for their money. And everybody had a different plan for how this was to look. The majority of the people said that we should invest it and not spend it. And I remember, in fact, one conversation was with my pastor, and this is right after what was called Black Tuesday. And you can go back in history and find out what Black Tuesday was all about. But I remember saying, Pastor, you lost, because he said it from the pulpit, you lost $30,000 in a day. How is that not gambling? And he said, well, it was all paper. None of it was my money. And he had a way to describe that was not incorrect, right? But to me, it seemed it mattered, right? I wanted to know, well, do I have that luxury to be able to just lose that kind of money? Can I ever count on that kind of money? Can I count on money in general, ever? And then I talked to my uncle. And he was these guys. He'd sell real estate and make $1 million off the commission, doing real estate businesses in San Francisco, and so he was very wealthy. And I said, "What should we do?" He gave me a wise piece of advice. He said this. He said, "Where you guys are right now, you are not investors." Now here's a guy that believes in investment, so he didn't have an axe to grind. There's somebody who was an elder in a mega church and a wealthy businessman. He had raised godly children. He was somebody worthy of respect. And he said, you are not, at this time in your life, you are not investors, which brought up this whole concept, which is a brand new concept for me. There are moments, there are times, there are seasons. And if we fail to recognize those, then the Bible would classify us as unwise. And it isn't as though investment was bad or the stock market was bad. It was that this wasn't the right moment. And he could see that. Now, that doesn't mean he was right or wrong. That was his advice, and we took it to heart, and we went from there. So what I want to do is I want to get us into a passage that talks about money. And the reason is that we can give you all kinds of information in Bible college about God. But if we don't give you wisdom, you won't understand how to apply God, as it were, to your circumstances, to your moments. And I have seen Christians be very, very spiritually minded and absolute idiots when it comes to how to live life, because they fail to be able to connect one moment to another. And so we're going to go to the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is one of those passages. It's just a book a lot of people struggle with. It's become one of my favorite books. And here's why. I'm going to just give you a quick snapshot. Go ahead and put it up, Zach. This is why this is one of my favorite books. Excerpt out of Ecclesiastes chapter 5. This also is a grievous evil. Exactly as a man is born, thus he will die. See, it's already endearing, isn't it? So what is the advantage to him who toils for the wind? Well, look at this. This is verse 17 is fantastic. I mean, this is, if you're looking for a devotion, this is it. Throughout his life, he also eats in darkness with great vexation, sickness, and anger. All right, if you could capture this moment right here, it's probably all you needed today just to get you ready for the game. So it's not a real devotional book, is it? And yet, there's something valuable here. Something valuable here that we need to get in on. So turn with me to the book of Ecclesiastes and to chapter 5. We're going to talk about the folly of riches. We're going to cover 10 verses, chapter 5, verse 10 through 20. And if you do have your Bible or electronic copy, I would encourage you, it'll be better if you follow along in this instance. I don't usually do it this way, but this is a great way to do it. Some people do it this way. And here's Solomon, as Solomon writes, here's Solomon's basic starting point for us. He has this assumption about life. He has this assumption that there is a great evil here. Have you discovered that yet? That there is for all of us, there is our expectations, there are our hopes, our dreams, our desires, our vision, our plans, our heritage, all of these things that we have, that we come to life with, that we invest in, that we talk about, that we spend time moving towards. But he's come to this conclusion at this point in his life, as he writes, Solomon has come to this conclusion. All of those things are subjected to a broken world. All of that great thinking is subjected to a broken world. In other words, because the world is broken, or because there's a great evil here, as he calls it, a great resistance here, it has the potential to undo and unpack our plans and just smear it so that we can't achieve the thing that we set out to achieve. We never get where we really, really want to go. So there are things that disrupt. And he calls that futility, or striving after the wind, or life is like a vapor. So we try to go manage something or do something, and we get somewhere, and everything seems to be going well, and then war breaks out. And all of a sudden we're on the run, and we lose our business, and our family is disintegrated, and our people are murdered, and our church home is no more, and we find ourselves in a situation just filled with calamity. That would be reality. Most of the time. That's the way the world seems to be. And a way to remember that is this. Solomon believes that there's a lot of motion. We're moving places, but there's very little promotion. We're not actually advancing very far. But if that's true, and that seems to be a negative view of life, but maybe it's just a realistic view of life. If that's true, what is good for a person to do in that context? Is there anything valuable, or is there anything that we can learn from that context? This is where many Christians struggle with the book, because in their thinking and in their theology, especially if they're in what I call the positive cult, okay, where everything's got to be positive all the time, When they are confronted with real life, they pray around it, right? Like the goal of life is that the brokenness around us goes away, and God is powerful enough to take it away. So when I encounter brokenness in myself or in a situation or in somebody else's life, the very first or the best thing that I could ever possibly do is try to move the hand of God to get rid of it so that we can escape it. But that's not at all what God ever asks us to do. And so you're in the positive cult, right? When you say something true that's real about something, and you're maybe even a little aggressive about it, like Paul was when he wrote the book of Galatians. I'm amazed that you guys are so quickly deserting what the gospel that you heard from me. I'm just amazed. I mean, come on, I'm flabbergasted at this. And they will always respond with something positive. Because we can't sit there very long. We can't deal with reality. We can't mourn. We don't know how to mourn. So there's that side of Christianity. And then there's similarly, but there's another kind of group out there that kind of looks at reality, the doses of reality, and simply says wisdom really needs to be divorced from spirituality. Like the wise, those who are truly wise, aren't going to focus on things like money and material possessions. We're just going to ignore those things. And guess what happens? They do really poorly stewarding those things. And it shows up. And it not only shows that here's the evil, it not only shows up in their life, but in their children and their grandchildren's lives. So what we want to do is we do want to be wise. We want to be a wise people, not just a spiritual people, but if we're truly spiritual, Solomon attaches spirituality to reality. Yeah, that's profound. Write that down. He attaches spirituality to reality with all of the range of human emotion. And he says, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Incidentally, that's one of the reasons you're here at college, is so that we can talk about it. And he wants to bring us to some conclusions about money in the context of a broken world. What are we going to do with money in the context of a broken world? So here's some things that he initially says about money. And it's not, again, if you're thinking the way Solomon is thinking, it makes sense. If you're coming at it from some hyper spiritual level, you're just going to get lost in the forest here. But let's try to look at this from his vantage point. Is there anything good for us to do in this place? He says, verse 10, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its income. This is vanity, or striving after a wind, or a great evil, or whatever you want to put in there. He uses all of that terminology. He who loves money won't be satisfied with money. In other words, if your goal in life is to insulate yourself from the calamities and the realities that come by bringing in more income, if more income is always your answer to life's problems, which seems to be the American ethic, if that's the answer to life's problems, what will be the result in a broken world that is adverse to you? Well, it says you won't be satisfied with it. It's like this. His first encounter with the truth for us is something that maybe we all would agree here on. But money has the tendency to promise more than it delivers, right? So Solomon is looking out there on how people actually live, and he says, here's what they do. They try to acquire money to stop life from being bad, right? We acquire prayers to stop life from being bad. There's a whole other sermon right there. But the world tends to acquire money to stop life from being bad. And here's what he's saying. It isn't going to satisfy you. It promises way more than it delivers. Actually, he goes on and he says it's vanity, right? And then he says something that I think is interesting. He says, when good things increase. So you go out and you chase money, and what happens? Good things increase. But when good things increase, guess what else happens? Those who consume them increase. Have you found this to be true? In high school, I'm pretty sure, I made it all the way through high school without buying a single stick of gum. There were about 10 girls, And for the 4 years, I made sure to sit next to them at the moments, like the critical moments where I was going to need a stick of gum. And I would ask them, can I please have a stick of gum? And I'd get the eyes, the dog, little puppy dog eyes. And without fail, I got a stick of gum. And this was my goal from the beginning, never to buy a stick of gum in high school. I think I accomplished my goal. When good things increase, those who consume them increase. So you think you've got it. I mean, you've really got it going on, and you've got money and it's coming in. And guess what happens? All of a sudden you have more friends. And now you have a stewardship and responsibility you never intended. And did you actually advance? Are you even worse off in some ways? This is what Solomon is pointing us to. This is the vanity or the great evil. So what advantage is it to their owners except to look on? I have a boat. We call those money pits. You have a boat, it's a good thing. It increases your life. It increases your potential. Guess what also it increases? Now you got to protect it. Now you got to build a barn to house it. Now you got to fix it because they break every single year, no matter whether it's new or whether it's old. And now the money just keeps going. And now you have to validate the purchase. And I'm not saying boats are evil. I want one. I grew up with one. But now you have friends who want to use the boat, and you want friends to use the boat so you can validate the fact that you made a purchase and went into the hole to get the boat in the first place. Besides, who wants to go bass fishing by themselves anyway? And we're going to say that it's for ministry, and that helps our wives understand that that's what it's really for. So all of a sudden, we've created this whole circle of conversation around this thing, right? Check your motives. So what is the advantage to their owners except to look on? Here's another aspect. The sleep of the working man, this is going to shock you. The sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to sleep. The rich here would be the owner or the one over the worker. Be careful of wanting to own your own business. It promises more than it delivers. That sounds anti-capitalist. Solomon had no knowledge of capitalism, but he is calling something to the forefront. Sometimes it's wonderful to be second in command, not first. There is a burden and a responsibility here. To be the guy that hires everybody else, that may be what God is calling you to do. But if you think that that is going to solve your problems, it will create more problems. Believe me. Right? Wouldn't it be great if I could just get out from under the chain of my boss and I could just go and I could just do what I want and have... Watch out, Solomon says, it promises more than it delivers. So he's kind of deconstructing some of our natural understanding of how we should relate to money. Better to be the worker in many situations. He goes on, verse 13, there is a grievous evil which I have seen under the sun, riches being hoarded by their owner to his hurt. Hold on a second. I've been taught that I'm supposed to get money, and then I'm supposed to save money. I'm supposed to give a tenth to the church, and then I'm supposed to keep a tenth for myself. I mean, that's just the way it's supposed to be, right? Well, I'm not arguing that there isn't some goodness to that scenario. However, this principle of saving money for a rainy day, is it even biblical? Actually, Solomon seems to argue against it. What is he arguing for here? He says, here's another evil. Here's something that doesn't work out like you think it's going to. There's this grievous evil which I have seen under the sun. In other words, everybody experiences it because we all live under the sun. Riches being hoarded by their owner to his hurt. Anybody think of the Christmas story? Little McDuck, right? Scrooge. This is this playing itself out. That there's something about the nature of hoarding the riches for that rainy day, and the rainy day never comes, and the riches become the possessor instead of the possession. I'll just build bigger barns, as Jesus says in the Gospel of Luke. I'll just acquire more. I'll just put more away, and then I'll be ready, and then I can meet the demands of life. And then if calamity happens, I'll be okay. But we learn from the book of Job what? It happens even to the righteous. Everything can be lost. Your life can be demanded of you. Actually, something sinister enters the person who believes that putting their money in the bank and just keeping it there is the way money was meant to be used. Solomon says there's a different way to live. He'll start moving that direction now. We'll get there. But he starts by saying this: when those riches were lost, the Job story, right? But this is through a bad investment. He had not fathered a son, then there was nothing to support him. In other words, the son that would have taken care of the poor man in his old age didn't exist. The riches he lost through a bad investment. And now what has he got to show for it? This is reality, Solomon says. This is the way life often works. If you're putting all your eggs in that basket of your savings account, beware, is what Solomon might say to you. And then he goes on, verse 15, as he has come, that is the man, right? As he has come naked from his mother's womb, so he will return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry in his hand. There's this moment of truth Solomon wants us to understand about money. It stays here. All of it. It all stays here. This also is a grievous evil. Exactly as a man is born, thus will he die. Naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked I will return, right? Exactly as a man is born, thus will he die. In other words, he's saying God did not intend it this way, but in a broken world, this is the way it is. We have this eternity in our hearts idea that we're supposed to live forever on earth, by the way. But we don't. We all die. And we don't get to take it with us, and we were meant to. We were meant to continually accumulate and do something with it forever, and we were meant to be able to see our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, but that's not the way we see things happening in this life. So, throughout his life, he eats in darkness with vexation, sickness, and anger. Solomon kind of concludes that all of those things that money promises, all the reasons we chase money down, he's just deconstructed all of it. Listen, you're not going to take it with you. If you think owning your own business is really where it's at, watch out. It promises more than it delivers. As soon as you acquire some stuff, you'll get false friends very, very quickly. And when the money's gone, those friends will leave. This is what we know about life. You see, that's awfully cynical. Didn't we just have a chapel on cynicism? So what good then is there here? That's really what Solomon is after. But to get there, he has to deconstruct our preconceived notions about money. Is there anything good here? Is there anything we can learn? What would the wise do? If the wise are living not in positive world, but in reality world, what would they do if this was the scenario they are being confronted with? Well, here's what I have seen to be good and fitting, verse 18. To eat, to drink, and enjoy oneself. And when Solomon says drink, he's not talking about a cup of water. And enjoy oneself in all one's labor in which he toils under the sun during the few years of his life which God has given him, for this is his reward. What? That does not sound like Christian mission at all. You mean here's what you should do? You should just consume? You could consume a little food, consume a little wine, and when you work, give thanks. That's what you should do. That's all you've got for us. After all the years, and you're the guy that asked for wisdom from above, this is all you have for us. Furthermore, as for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, he has also empowered him to eat from them. Back to food. And to receive his reward and rejoice in his labor. This is the gift of God. For he will not often consider the years of his life, because God keeps him occupied with gladness, the gladness of his heart. What is in there for us? Is there anything that Solomon is saying? Well, here's what he's saying. Go with me here. Isn't he saying that money was made to be spent, not hoarded? The issue is spent on what? At what time? When? How? That's where the wise go. They don't trust in their money. They don't put it in the bank forever. What do? They may take some money and save it in the bank, but they will save it for a very specific purpose. They'll put a line item on it, to be very practical. Because money was not made to be preserved in a barn, because you're going to die and it's going to be gone. Money was made to be spent. If you save it, that's great. That's wisdom. That may be a stewardship. But don't you dare start to hope in it, or you'll become just like, right, Scrooge McDuck. I like the Disney version better. Yeah. You'll be that person. It will become something sinister in your life when you begin to hope in it. Money was made to be spent. So even when you take it and you put it in the bank so that it can grow interest, we call that an investment. It is an investment for something earthly. It was made to be spent at Christmas time when you buy a package of gifts for the neighbor in your community that can't afford to give their children gifts. Now it's doing something good. Right? It was meant to be put away in a bank and grow, or put in the stock market and grown, so that at some point you wouldn't be a dependent upon your children, but you can continue to be a blessing to your children even long after you die. But it was made to be spent. Always attach a purpose to your money that's bigger than the worldly minded purposes that we see around us here. Attach it to people. Attach it to godly things. Grow it. Go ahead. If you can own your own business, do it. But you won't find your happiness in owning your own business. And that won't protect you from life or reality. It may just bring a whole new set of adverse circumstances into your life. That's the way it goes. But you can do something good there. You can channel things where they need to go. We're not to be hoarders, we're to be channelers. Are you with me? This is Solomon's wisdom. And in doing so, we give thanks for what we have been given, 18 through 20. We give thanks for what we've been given. We enjoy it. We don't just put it in the bank. We consume it and we channel it. We consume it and we channel it. We consume it and we give thanks, and we channel it and we give thanks. And then we avoid the traps and the pitfalls of money. We're careful to say, I'm going to buy this boat, but it's not the thing that's going to give me happiness. This boat is a gift. I may have earned it, but it's a gift, truly, to those around me, to my family, so that we can enjoy and we can increase and we can spread our umbrella and we can do something for our community and we can do something good here. There's something good to be done even in an environment filled with brokenness and adversity. The wise don't collect money because it indicates the collection of money that you're putting your trust in it. The wise channel it. That's what the wise do. They turn their lives inside out. And it's not that money is evil in and of itself, but again, money was made to be spent. Ask the Lord for wisdom and how to spend it. Ask the Lord to help you to see the future so that you can spend it wisely. Ask the Lord to be involved in that process. And then you'll be content with what you have. There's a great secret here. You'll be content because there's a purpose attached to the dollar. There's a purpose. And you've brought that purpose to the Lord. And you don't have to feel guilty because you put it in the stock market or because you put it in some investment is a biblical idea. Putting money in the bank, it's a biblical idea. Putting money in the savings account, wrapping it up so that you can never access it, there's a great evil here. Wherever your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Jesus would say, right? Make sure that you make money work for you and you don't end up working for your money. So there's some wisdom, and we're accountable. We're accountable to live that way. And I hope that maybe you'll kind of see this last verse as a positive in the book of Ecclesiastes. Rejoice in your labor. This is the gift of God. The ability to rejoice. This is a gift. For he will not often consider the years of his life, because God keeps him occupied with gladness, the gladness of his heart. Satisfaction in the realm of finances is possible, whether you're rich or whether you're poor. What a beautiful thing to declare to the world. Everybody needs to know this stuff. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for wisdom. Lord, there are a lot of books out there written on finances, but you have actually written a book, and it's quite clear. Help us to know that